Welcome, everybody. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Let's make sure I got everything going here. Welcome to episode 22. Fiddled with my settings a little bit. Hopefully, my mic isn't too loud. Let me know in chat. Welcome back, guys. Back at it after a long hiatus. Here we are again. Episode 22. Thanks for your patience. Hope everyone had a wonderful summer. Wisconsin. Yeah. Oh, let me know in chat. Sounds good? Good. Perfect. Okay. Fiddling with everything. It's been so long since I've even turned this on. It was all the settings were wrong. So yeah, lots of I think since the last time I did an episode, I've done a few different interviews. So hopefully some of you are here from those. If not, for my longer term subscribers, check out I did an interview with Sam Tripoli, Tinfoil Hat, and also round 4 with Greg at the Higher Side Chats. Yeah, a few other things. Nothing that's gone live yet, but yeah, those are two big ones. Kind of covering the usual run for the channel, but hopefully some of you have found your way here through all of that, and yeah. Let's not waste any time. Ian, oh, good to see you, man. Tinfoil, cool. Yeah, and you've been here for so many of my live streams. Good to see you. Andy B, first time. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, my mother lived in both Minnesota and Wisconsin before I was born. But two places I very much look forward to visiting. Andy B, welcome. Green Tea, good to see you. Crown Jewels music, yeah, I'll definitely check that stuff out. Appreciate you sending me some links. Walker Bear, good to see you. Hopefully you're still here. Tuba Lizard, excited for new episode. Welcome. All right, let's get moving here. Kind of going to start this off the same way I do most of these. For anybody that's new, we're just going to kind of roll through my Twitter. I make a little thread in the days leading up to these episodes, and going forward, again, we'll do these every 2 weeks, and I'm going to try and do them on Mondays. With sports for the kids and school and everything, Mondays seems like pretty much the only day that's going to work. Typically have soccer on Thursdays, but a bit of a heat wave here, so it was put off. But yeah, we're going to roll through my Twitter thread here. And kind of cover again, as I was mentioning, some of the things that I post. So for those of you following along as we get close to the episode, you'll kind of get a better idea of what we're going to be talking about. And I just share all kinds of fun stuff. Pictures I've saved over the years of putting these together. Again, I clipped a lot of these articles long before I ever planned on presenting them at all. So the majority of the work, unfortunately, goes into just kind of reorganizing everything. And yeah, my archive was not organized in any particular manner, especially not in a way separated by states and stuff like that. So when I can, I provide as much of the information on the article and where it was printed as I can, and then I kind of go back through and I organize everything and show pictures from the the time periods. But yeah, let's jump right in here. And we're just going to go over some pictures first, and then we'll get into some articles, and then from there we'll get into the longer form stuff. Mr. Bryce, Timothy, good to see you again. Amanda, love your chats on. Yeah, cool. Thanks for being here. Good to see you back. I thought about you this morning. Wondered if somehow. Oh, that's funny. Well, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, it's been like I don't even know how long it's been since I did an episode. It's been 2.5 months or longer. Long time. So I'm a little rusty, but we're gonna get through it. So yeah, like I said, we're just gonna see if I can. Unfortunately, I'm running 3 different windows here. So I'm going to try to make these as large as I can for you guys without it being. Hopefully that helps. So yeah, we'll just look at pictures. Some fun pictures here. The Wisconsin University in the 1800s. This is incredible. Again, my bread and butter is, lost relics, buried civilizations, historical oddities, on and on and on. Expositions, all kinds of stuff like that. But often when I do these, I'll show some incredible architecture from the 1800s, and Wisconsin University is no exception. Incredible building built on a massive mound. No coincidences there. Many of these old universities are built on big mounds. Worthy of note as well, like many of these universities, they have 3, 4, if not 5 stories of basement underneath. So it kind of makes you wonder, like Capitol buildings follow the same line. Wisconsin Dells, just a really kind of their own mini Grand Canyon. A lot of very similar, although they explain it as glacial drift, it also has a lot of features very similar to the Grand Canyon, showing kind of electromagnetic scarring. This is the Bethesda Mineral Spring. Probably the most popular tourist destination at the time in this neck of the woods in Wisconsin. The water was so valuable that they were bottling so much. 50 wagons were kept constantly busy carrying the water to the depot, and an order for 10,000 worth of bottles was lately sent by the company to a glass factory. Very interesting that the glass factory was using this mineral radium laden water, but also very, very beautiful place. Again, the mineral spring was like the first kind of tourist destination in the late 1800s, and they were sending sick patients where, quote, modern medicine wasn't really taking effect. They'd send them to these mineral springs, and yeah, they're all over the U.S., but slowly were bought out or disappeared. Here's a few bird's eyes that I liked. Lake Geneva, 1882. And again, for those of you following along, the link to this will be in the description if you want to go through it at your own pace. Massillon, Milwaukee, and the Lake region. More and more people finding their way in. Welcome everybody. Thanks again for joining me. Glad to see so many familiar faces. Hopefully a lot of new people here as well. Waterloo, good to see you as always. Madison, very geomantic. All these cities have defined layouts, but the big capitals are always geomantic, very much so. Madison being the most prominent. Again, this is mid 1800s, 1860s. Pretty incredible. Again, Capitol building on a hill. Again, guaranteed 4 or 5 stories below this building. This one's quite different from most of your other Capitol buildings. It's kind of got this octagonal towers on the end, very kind of Moorish touches with a slightly skinnier tower. Interesting, worth of note here. This is like 1860. So, again, remember, we're building these insane Capitol buildings and city layouts. And, when you'll find a hard time finding any construction photos again, going with the popular narrative again that the really special buildings, very few of them survive. And this was Milwaukee. And this is the post office. You can see again the cutoff stairs up to the first floor. Incredible building. The post office buildings, it's like there's not even enough population to justify the resources on these post office buildings, and they're in every major city, and they only get bigger and bigger and bigger the more east you move, especially Chicago, Philadelphia, New York are some of the ones that stand out to me, but there's the big ones in California, Montana, Arizona, on and on. Railroad station, incredible. Courthouse building. I think there was one more I wanted to show. The Asylums. This is kind of a newer one. The last 3 or 4 episodes, I've made sure to include a few of these just because, the historical explanation for these is just as wonky as any of the other explanations for the buildings and the constructions. But yeah, I found at least 20 that were built before 1890, and they're all incredibly gigantic. Some of them having up to 2,000 or more quote patients. Often built in the middle of nowhere, but this one very much mud flooded, buried. Rock County, Marathon County, dirt roads, of course. Stairs to the first floor, basement that's halfway buried. Same here, stairs to the first floor. Milwaukee County Asylum, buried floors. And again, that's only 4 of the 20. I'm sure there's more. That's all I could find. And many of them were built in the 1860s, 1870s. So, lining these ideas up with the explanations about, the courthouse buildings that are going up and the railroad buildings that are going up and, the struggle for good labor in the 1860s in Milwaukee and all of these cities. Again, this is everywhere. This is every major city. And, we're on episode 22. And for any of you newcomers, this is the running kind of gag of it all is that not only are there lacking explanations for many of these things, just the sheer manpower and resources. I mean, you think of how many other industries have to be in full swing to build a horse and carriage and then build a building of this size. It's pretty daunting, let alone the location of a lot of these. It's one thing when you're building buildings like this in a city with infrastructure and railroads and so on and so forth, but you'll find that these asylums are out in the absolute middle of nowhere. And, using my own home state as an example, the largest building in Oregon in the 1800s was 2 of them were insane asylums, and one of them was in Pendleton, Oregon. And, it wasn't in downtown Pendleton. It was in the middle of nowhere, where just getting the freight and the materials to the site would have been an unbelievable amount of work, let alone justifying the amount of people it would have taken to occupy this asylum when Pendleton was this tiny little town. And that's kind of the running story for all of these. But, some of these places have hundreds and hundreds of rooms, thousands or more patients. It's just what was going on. And this is probably my favorite set of pictures. This is, I believe, 1880. There were 4 other photos, but I only shared these 4, and it was of Madison, 1880. You can see it, just beautiful. Dirt roads, though. Main reason here is to this round tower. Very interesting. Very interesting. You don't see a lot of these in photos, especially in this time frame. And this is obviously gone, but very Irish influence. The Irish round towers is what stood out to me. But yeah, I think that's it for photos. Gonna see who all's in here. Old World McMac, good to see you. Brett, holy smokes. Good to see you, Brett. Miss you, man. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great summer. Same with you, Old World McMac. Appreciate you being here. Mr. E, good to see you. David Robertson, good to see you. So they had more mental health facilities back then than they do now. Oh, by a gigantic margin. Yeah. And they were doing all kinds of crazy shit in these facilities too. Yeah, so I'm going to try and do a better job of covering a little bit more of those in the coming episodes. And maybe I'll just do a whole series on the asylum narrative and how many questions that poses. And yeah. But just let me know in the comments if the insane asylum subject is something you want me to dive into more. Then I certainly perhaps will make that a separate thing. Biocharisma, good to see you. Wisco in the house. Yeah, good to see you, brother. Miss you, man. Hope you had a good time at Baitaria. Wish I could have made it. Ever come across these buildings being built at the time they say it? No. I mean, there are lots of conflicting statements when it comes to construction photos, but you'll never see groundbreaking. You'll never see cornerstones being laid. You'll never see stone foundations, and if you do, it's very, very, very rare. I mean, very rare. So, and I'm not saying that there weren't buildings that were built from the ground up in these times frame. Of course there were. I'm just saying that when it comes to some of these really incredible, monstrous buildings, and then the sheer scale of things that are being built and the population density, that when you just look at the census, it doesn't support these kind of ideas. Especially, again, like I was saying, just the amount of infrastructure to build a building like that, because you got to think of all the things that go into a home. You raise the scale, pipes and heating and everything, flooring, siding, lumber, steel, whatever's involved in that. And then to the transportation is a whole nother factor in itself. It just doesn't make sense. A Garden of Eden was in Florida, the only place gopher wood grows. Abbott, yeah. Yeah, gopher wood actually is found in several places, not just Florida. That's a misconception. Although, again, as a big Longo fan, there's many other things that point to the whole Garden of Eden in Florida narrative. But yeah, gopher wood's actually found in several states. But yeah, love that subject banner. But anyways, 100 people, 99. Thanks for being here, guys. Anybody I may have missed in chat, appreciate you. We'll start flowing through some little shorter articles that weren't quite relative to full page, and then I'm going to read probably my favorite little caption, favorite little newspaper caption from a paper from 1846. That kind of sums up how I go about presenting in my kind of opinions and the Antiquities of the West ideas. And but yeah, so I'm just gonna flow through these as quickly as I can, so we can spend a little more time on the longer form stuff. Giant foot in stone, Minnesota. Again, that's where the article was printed, but it's describing a find in northern Wisconsin. A curious formation of sandstone has been found at Bloomer, Wisconsin, a thriving little city in northern Wisconsin. The stone is in the exact shape of an Indian's foot encased in a moccasin. The resemblance is so close that when the foot was first found, it was thought to be a petrifaction, and the townspeople often referred to various conjectures as to the probable size of the man that in life had been possessed of such a remarkably large foot. From the outer edge of the heel to the end of the toes, the foot is 32 inches, lacking only 4 inches of being a yard in length. The formation of the foot is perfect, and at the ankle the stone is broken as though separated by some titanic force from the leg, of which it had once formed a part. The circumference of the ankle where it was broken is 35 inches. The foot is nearly 4 times as large as an ordinary man's foot, and in proportion the man might have had such a foot must needs had and in proportion the man that might have had such a foot must needs have been a giant more than 20 feet tall. I apologize, the verbiage there threw me off. It is very probable that the foot is a petrifaction. And for those of you again new, I've covered giant feet and giant sandals and giant petrifactions of whole bodies and limbs and hands and eyeglasses, even of giant eyeglasses. I believe Nevada was that one. Yeah, all define scope. Although geologists who have examined the stone are not as one on the proposition, some is asserting that their opinion that it is the foot of a giant prehistoric Dinsian of this country, which by action of certain chemical elements in the earth where it had lain hundreds of years, perhaps had become a piece of stone. Others assert that it is merely a piece of sandstone. Yeah, and I've covered the petrifaction thing and how easy it is for the human body to turn to stone. In fact, it can happen in just a few days. I've covered an article in the past about a gentleman who could turn a person to stone in just 3 days. In my Tennessee episode, I cover a lake that was so mineral rich that it was called the petrifying lake, and that it would literally turn people to stone in hours. An Indian mound opened. A giant skeleton, 1873. The discovery exceeded anticipation. A skeleton of such size to indicate it must have been a giant. The jawbone easily encased the skull of the largest laborer. It was encased in a blanket. Many Mexican coins. So again, a lot of these bodies found in mounds are wrapped in blankets. A few days ago, the men engaged in building the road bed of the Green Bay and Winona Railroad struck an Indian mound near Arcadia. Arcadia, probably Arcadia misspelled. Again, no coincidence in the Arcadia stuff. I've shown the connections with previous civilizations and the idea of what is Arcadia. It had been in view for some days, and no little speculation was indulged. The thigh bones were more like those of a horse than a man, hair heavy and remarkably well preserved. The Mexican coin thing, though, that's really common. Covered that in a few of these now. All the way up into Alaska, they find, quote, Mexican coins. And not to be confused with Spanish. Very different. Looking back through here in chat. Yes, many Native Americans were sent to asylums. Absolutely. Especially their, quote, chiefs and wise men and their druidic types, their holy men. Yeah, absolutely they were. They didn't toe the line. They were. Oh, Longo, good to see you. Appreciate you. Good to see you, man. Miss you. Glad you're here. I'm going to read through this whole one because this is a good little one here. And this is called Another Giant Discovered, 1870. In Milton, Wisconsin correspondent of the Milwaukee Sentinel writes today, as the hired help of Miss Stanley were digging for the purpose of laying the foundation of a barn, they struck a large bone that had the appearance of a human skull, but of enormous size, that they thought it must belong to some animal. It was found in a slight mound on the east side of a hill overlooking Rock River, and in the town of Janesville. Dr. Townsrow, a gentleman of fortune, chanced to be passing as the workmen were cleaning the dirt from the skull, and at their request got over the fence and examined it and pronounced it as belonging to the human family. The men fell to work and exhumed the entire skeleton. It was found in a fair state of preservation. The skull measured 32.5 inches in circumference, and the thigh bone 44.5 inches in length. The doctor thought that when living, he could not have been less than 13 feet in height. The teeth were all in the jaws and were of enormous size. The doctor extracted one which measured 1.5 inches in length. That's crazy. The most remarkable part of this strange discovery is the fact that the lower limbs, from near the knee to the end of the toes, are entirely petrified. The flesh having changed to stone, and the parts being perfect in shape. So it's like a skeleton into stone legs. Pretty amazing. As he was buried in a sitting posture. Pretty common again, the sitting posture for some of these, for somebody of high stature. It was common to be buried in a sitting posture. Very Asiatic, Buddha like, in the center of the mounds. Not the first time, probably one of a dozen now of a sitting skeleton. But again, the giant size being very curious. Dr. Towndrow promptly offered Mr. Stanley $10,000 for the skeleton, which Mr. Stanley promptly accepted. So again, $10,000 in 1870. Whoo, pretty crazy. My brain cell, good to see you. Tim, welcome back, Ben. Just searched your channel the other day for updates. Oh, thanks for joining me, man. Yep, updates are coming. Plan again is going forward. Anomalous America is going to be every 2 weeks. And I'm going to kind of finish up a few of the video series that I have going right now, which is I'm going to tidy up my Mesoamerica series, and I'm going to tidy up my Ireland the Great series, and kind of kick off a few things that I've been working on my hiatus. So yeah, Chassis, Nick's good to see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Okay. So yeah, we'll do a few more of these, and then we'll get into the longer form stuff. 135. Grateful that you guys are here. You know, after my first stream in like 3 months, that's incredible. Appreciate each and every one of you spending your precious time with me tonight. Prehistoric teeth found in Madison, those of Hippus. C.A. Kinsey received a report on the fossil skull and other prehistoric teeth and bones, which he sent to the Smithsonian, of course. That's another series that I have coming up, probably in the next week or so. We're going to kickstart this Smithsonian series. We're going to break down the foundations of it, the founding of the institution, Mr. Smithsonian's background himself, and get into kind of some of that material. It's going to be about 3 or 4 episodes, so stay tuned for that. The report states that the skull, which the curved front fangs, is that of an extinct camel. The different parts that Mr. Kinsey sent in were classified as belonging to 4 species. That of the 3-toed horse, the Parahippus, Protohippus, Hipparion, and Meryhippus, prehistoric ancestors of the present horse. There was also a smaller species of camel, a neck vertebrae of a Proboscidean, neither mastodon or elephant, and 2 small pieces of ivory tusk, unidentified. Professor Earl Douglas, formerly a teacher in Gallatin Schools, curator of geology of the University of Utah, commenting on the photos sent him by Mr. Kinsey, stated that the horse and camel and rhinoceros originated in America and became extinct here about 1 million years or so ago. Again, you know, I don't follow these millions or hundreds of thousands of years, but again, I think the most important takeaway from this was, as I've been stating so many times before, that the horse and the camel and the rhinoceros, like many other animals, originated here in America and became extinct here. You know, the idea that the Arabs were bringing camels here and that the Spaniards were bringing horses here, that's all complete nonsense. They were already here. Timber. I won't go into this whole one, but basically I'll just read the synopsis. At a depth of 55 feet, diggers came upon a piece of timber, tamarack, splendidly preserved, petrified, They found diamonds, topaz, malachite, sardonyx, chrysolites, all kinds of really incredible crystals at a depth of 55 feet. I don't want to read this one. This is called Aztalan, the Indian Babylon. We're going to get into longer form stuff. A big chunk of what I'm going to talk about here is going to be about the settlement here that was named Aztalan, correlating that with the rest of America, Ireland the Great stuff as well. This is a good one. This is 1886. Discovery of ancient works. A party of land prospectors recently came upon some ancient works near Shawano. They first found what appeared to be the ruins of an old well, walled up with stones, in which a moderate supply of cold water was found. They removed the stones which had caved in to a depth of about 3 feet. Further examination revealed the fact that the ground around was regularly paved with stones for at least an acre, varying from 3 feet deep in the center to a foot at the outer edges. That's making me think that this is a paved, circular kind of city center, and that the well was at the center of that, and the water kind of, or the land sort of was concave towards the well. As they stated, it was 3 feet deep at the center, varying all the way to a foot. And it covered at least an area of an acre. The stones are covered with moss, which may be rolled up like a blanket, disclosing the stone as clean as if water washed. The country about is timbered, and trees 2 feet in diameter are growing above the ruins, while the forms of a prior generation of trees, even larger, lie in moss and decay at their feet above the ruins. So 2 separate growths of trees, the youngest being 2 feet in diameter, the oldest ones, they don't say, are growing on top of these ruins. A stone fountain and a paved area of stones covering at least an acre. Again, this is every state. Every state they find stuff like this. The only difference being that it's only a foot or 3 feet below ground. And interesting. This is something we won't talk about later on. I'll just summarize it and show you the picture. This was found buried below a basement. They were digging a cellar, and they found this, an ancient ostensorium. Look at this relic, buried in the earth. And this is the story they came up with, which, again, when you find, quote, Catholic relics like this, buried below a building that's been there for 100 years or more, the story is quite interesting. 1889, an ostorium, which belonged to a mission 200 years ago, when digging in a cellar in 1802. So the story is that in 1802 they find this, 1802, and that it was 200 years old. So 1602. So there was a Catholic mission in Wisconsin in 1602, buried in the earth. This relic was dated to the 1600s and found in 1802. Yeah. The stories with this don't make any sense. It's like many of the other Roman artifacts that I've covered. They found a ton in Arizona. They found a ton in New Mexico, a few in California, some in Oregon. And the story is always that there was a Catholic mission that no one knew about. And again, the dates don't ever make any sense. Pretty incredible, though. Imagine finding something like that when you're digging a cellar. They're like, oh, yeah, there was a Catholic mission here. And something must have happened, and they buried it in the dirt so no one would get it. Yeah, all these out-of-place artifacts. Effigy mounds, we're going to get into that. This is a short one. Ancient fort discovered in Wisconsin. A sensation has been created by the agreement of 20 or more scholars from historical societies of Wisconsin and the Minnesota State Normal School of Winona, the University at Madison, that the missing fort on the chart of Perret, the French explorer, has been discovered near the village of Tremblay. The fort was built in 1685. Again, all these, I've talked a lot about this in previous articles and previous episodes, the quote star forts that existed all over America There are dozens in every state, many, many more than that, generally along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Um, and that pre-war, pre-Civil War maps show them quite clearly. And the narrative is that the French built all these amazing, complex stone forts. That just the idea, again, like I mentioned earlier, about the amount of labor involved in quarrying the stone, transporting the stone, and building all these forts makes absolutely no sense. And that many of them are buried in 3, 5, 20, 100 feet of earth. In my Missouri episode, I cover one of these stone forts where the walls were over 100 feet tall. Um, on and on and on. I have some videos titled Antiquities of America, where I cover some of these, quote, European styled citadel forts that they find. This is just kind of a small little example, but they find them everywhere. And what ends up happening most of the time is they turn them into quarries, and the stone is taken apart and they're used to build other buildings. I covered an article in my Mississippi episode, I believe, where they were building buildings in the Capitol from a stone wall that they had found buried in the earth. And they blatantly were saying that they had called it Quarry Wall because they had been stealing these amazingly perfect stones to build other buildings in the city. And I think this is what has happened all across America, is that what they could destroy, they took apart and used it to build other things. Here, the perfect timing. In Wisconsin, ancient cities have been discovered named Aztalan. We're going to get into this more, and I'll probably use this as a perfect point to pivot into the longer form stuff. Built by a civilized people, the Indians have a tradition of the Aztecs conquering their fathers and came here with tools, implements of various kinds. That they built houses and cultivated the soil, and in 100 years, disliking the climate, they burnt their cities and proceeded to Mexico, which they conquered. A late writer says of one city near Milwaukee that there are amongst these ruins walls and buttresses built of brick. This brick is evidently formed by a mixture of clay and sand in the imminent vicinity. Judging from its appearance, it was piled up, mixed with grass or straw, and was then burnt or baked until it assumed a degree of hardness much greater than our ordinary brick, as is it now after the lapse of centuries quite as solid and difficult to break. It is full of pores of about an inch in diameter, which intersect in all directions, evidently caused by straw, which was consumed by the great heat necessarily made to harden the wall. There are also several square mounds of plains whose use must have been synonymous with the towers which are seen in the old forts of Europe. Again, like I had just mentioned, the similarities between the star forts and the, quote, citadels and castles of Europe, they are found all over this area, and some crazy event or several had led to their destruction. One of these contains an excavation or cellar from which a stairway leads to the top. About 3 feet below the surface of the ground is a sewer arched with stone. From the appearance of the ruins, it is evident that a part of them once contained a fort. On a slight eminence, about 18 rods to the right of the fort, are about 150 mounds, built on straight lines. They are evidently places of burial, as all that have been opened contain human bones, beads, and other Indian ornaments. Now, again, this is something I've kind of come to the conclusion of reading enough of these, is that a lot of these burials exist on top of these buildings, and that later civilizations were burying their dead on top of these things. Cahokia is a perfect example. St. Louis, that they would only dig a certain amount of depth down, and they would find the burial, 3, 4, 5 feet into the mound. But often, when they went deeper, they would find huge stone structures. And as I've stated many times, that these mound complexes are actually giant buried cities. Cahokia being the best example, because the buildings were so large, the pyramids were so large that they stuck up out of the ground over 100 feet. But they went down and found tunnels. Check out my Missouri episode and my Illinois episode if you want to see more on the tunnels they find. That all these big mounds are actually big stone structures, and that they go down 30, 40, 50 feet or more, and they don't find the bottom of these stone structures. They find tunnel systems connecting them with the mountains and the other mounds. Monk's Mound, like I said, the when they were building the bridge across the Missouri River or Mississippi from St. Louis to Cahokia, they found a tunnel when they were building the pylons for the bridge, connecting the mounds of St. Louis with the mounds of Cahokia. And then all of the mounds, Monk's Mound, you could travel this underground highway between all of these mounds. Oh, yeah, I think we're going to end. Okay. This is another one. Keep this one in your mind for later, because we're going to get deeper into Pyramid Lake. But an ancient pyramid found beneath Wisconsin Lake. 1,000-year-old pyramid lies under the waters of Rock Lake, Wisconsin. It is a vestige of an early Aztec civilization in the upper Mississippi Valley. For 30 years, the legend of the strange prehistoric pyramid has persisted in Wisconsin, ever since the day when, with water levels at an unprecedented low, a fisherman struck his oar on an unusual rock and came home with an incredible tale of an Indian pyramid under the water. Then a Milwaukee diver heard the tale. First, he tried to locate the pile by sighting it from an airplane. Then he tried a hydroscope in a moving boat. Finally, he developed a drag that was pulled along 14 feet below the surface of the lake. With this, the pyramid was found. Afterward, the diver went down to study his find. And then here's a book we're going to get into in a little bit. Rock Lake is a small body of water located about 30 miles east of Madison, Wisconsin, in the town of Lake Mills. The lake has been called Tyrrhenian by local Native American Indians. Really important word. We've talked about all the Tyra, Tyre, 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 Tyra, locale names, especially in this region. Mostly Winnebago, now termed Ho-Chunk, who lived there in the 1800s. Area residents had repeated rumors of Rock Lake's underwater structures for years. Although actual sightings of conical rock structures were recorded by Max Knoll in the late 1930s, these rock piles were first described by the Winnebago to the Tesh family in the late 1890s as rock teepees. According to one tribal legend, the stone cones were built by the Ancient Ones, a forgotten tribe who had abandoned the area. Now, these Ancient Ones are called the Ancient Ones by several tribes, going all the way into Southern California and northern Mexico. Also, the ones building the pyramids. I covered this kind of idea of the Ancient Ones in Arizona episode, New Mexico, Colorado, all over. And these rock teepees and the pyramids of America. Yeah. There's more here. Yeah, this is... Rock Lake measures approximately 1 mile in width and 2 miles in length. Situated on the lake's north end is a boat landing in adjacent Tyrrhenian Park. Tyrrhenia was a term used by the local Native Americans for the lake when settlers arrived in the early 1800s. Tyrrhenia is also the name of the port found in ancient Atlantis, as described in Plato's Timaeus. The pear-shaped lake measures over 5 miles in circumference and nearly 70 feet in depth at specific points. The size and depth of the lake has varied over the ages. Two distinct shorelines have suggested two water levels, the first at 40 feet, circa 3000 BC, and the second of 26 feet, dated to approximately 1200 BC. I guess we'll finish this and then we'll jump into... Yeah, perfect. The capital of an empire. The ancient minds explain why a civilization at Rock Lake came about. Tyrrhenia was at the pivot point and crossroads of the prehistoric copper trade. The raw minerals were extracted from the Michigan pits during the short summer season and transported to Rock Lake via the direct river routes that connected the two sites for collection and casting in preparation for shipment. That the ancient inhabitants of Rock Lake were in fact the same people who mined copper in the Upper Peninsula, there can be little doubt. While no burials exist throughout their vast mining district around the shores of Rock Lake, were more than 70 grave mounds containing the remains of unknown thousands of ancient dead, some interred, many more cremated, and indefinitely associated with the prehistoric miners. Among the best preserved examples were the bones of a man accompanied by a pebble hammer of the exact kind found throughout Isle Royal. Again, Isle Royal, for those of you who don't know, is the island in the middle of Lake Michigan, where they find all these copper mines. And huge amounts of copper still exist there today. Such tools were used to finish the extracted copper, flattening spurs and trimming off sharp edges. The miner had been buried in a conical earth mound on the south shore of Rock Lake, doubtless, like his fellow workers, still lying under its waters beneath identical structures of stone. Workers who died on the job in the Michigan copper mines were brought back to be buried in Tyrrhenia's necropolis. Investigators have sought Isle Royal's ancient cemetery for more than 100 years. They need only look as far as Rock Lake. Now, again, these conical mounds are found all over America and are really important when we talk about the connections with the Etruscans and the Celts. And the dates for America's prehistoric mining coincide with the submerged stone structures. The period when operations resumed even more closely fits with the life of Aztalan, whose demise took place at the same moment the mines ceased functioning for the last time. But if the Toltecs of Middle America and possibly the Andean civilizers of South America were the Aztlaners' customers in the 10th through 14th century, who wanted Michigan's copper in far greater quantities more than 2,000 years before? The Paleo Indians who sparsely populated the Great Lakes region could have made no demand for the mineral beyond occasional fragments of float copper picked up off the ground, not laboriously mined in 6,000-pound boulders. So yeah, we're describing a previous civilization, previous to what we would call the natives or the Aborigines, and again, the mining and the massive amount of trade. Again, Michigan copper or Isle Royal copper is found on all continents, as far as India, Mesopotamia, Italy, Ireland, Scotland, Peru, Argentina. I mean, Michigan copper has found its way across the world, and connecting them again with the Phoenician, quote, Phoenician traders is going to take up a big chunk of this time. 168 people. Thanks for being here, guys. Sorry if I missed some of you in chat. Doing my best to bounce back and forth here. All right, we're going to take a break from Twitter. And again, for those of you who are interested in reading at more of your own pace or seeing some of the stuff that I don't cover, a link to this will be found in the description, and you do not need an account to read it. So just keep that in mind. And going forward, I post there. I am going to be posting there pretty much every day going forward. And leading up to these episodes, the 4 or 5 days leading up to the episode, I'll be posting pretty consistently. So if you want to follow along, that's the place to do it. Yeah, so now we're going to jump into the longer form stuff, connect some dots, read through some older books, look at some archive stuff, and yeah, where are we at here time-wise? 5:22, 1 hour in, 1 hour to go. Let's see who else is in here. Susan Donahue, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Crypto Alchemist. Good to see you, brother. Thanks for joining me today. Chuck Doom. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Any questions or anything? There's so much copper that was extracted. It would have taken thousands of ships. Absolutely, James. Well said. Yeah, millions of tons. Millions of tons. Remember, Isle Royal is just one. They've found mines, copper mines, all over America. This is just the most famous one. And because of its composition, it's incredibly easy to identify it as Michigan copper because its characteristics are pretty special. And there are mines, again, all over the Great Lake region. So this is just one. But yeah, that's the most famous one. Okay, here we go. Long form. Here we go. See if I can. Does that even make it bigger for you guys? All right. So this one is called Antiquities of Wisconsin, 1846. And I like this one just because of the verbiage. It kind of sums up my channel. It sums up the kind of anomalous America theme. And then we're going to go deeper into the Aztalan material. Antiquities of Wisconsin. Remember, this is 1846. Okay, super early, and even calling the area Wisconsin. There is perhaps no portion of the globe that affords a wider field for antiquarian research than North America, and certainly no portion affording so many mysterious objects, the remains of an age and a race of men whose history is quite unknown. For the most part, the antiquities of the Old World admit of their history being distinctively traced, but those of America are involved in the greatest obscurity. There are scarcely any antiquaries in the Old World of which we do not know more than those so numerously scattered throughout the whole extent of North America. Nor does there seem to be much prospect of the history of our antiquities being very speedily unraveled, though it is quite certain that as yet they have by no means received that investigation which they deserve. As relics of the ancient history of the Western continent, they merit the most labored attention, and it is to be hoped that the more accurate surveys of many of the more remarkable remains will be made before they are defaced, are totally destroyed by the progress of improvement. The attention bestowed upon the ruins of Central America by Stevens, Norman, and others have made them more known than any other of the American antiquities. But imperfectly as have been investigated, the ruins of the southern portion of North America, far less attention has been given to those which are within the bounds of the United States. The vast number of tumuli, that's mounds, with which the country west of the Alleghenies is embossed, are very curious and mysterious remains, pointing to a period and a race of men far back in the history of the world. Now, not too long ago, I believe in last episode, I talked about a post where I described the Alleghenies was actually the Mount Olympus of the Greek and Roman um, Greek, um, and that the stories of Mount Olympus and all those things are based on the Alleghenies. There are few persons who have not seen them, but it is not so generally known, we believe, that in Wisconsin those remains present an appearance extremely curious and unlike any of those in other parts of the United States. Instead of being regular mounts like those which we have seen in different parts of Missouri and other states, or like the remains of what are supposed to have been Indian fortifications in Ohio and elsewhere, these Wisconsin antiquities consist of groups of strange, gigantic bas reliefs in the form of animals of different kinds, as if they had been formed by laying the animal on its sides and then slightly covering it with earth, so that when the covering was finished, the mound would retain the outlines of the body and limbs of the animal. Obviously, that's very metaphor based, but I just love that idea. As somebody who talks about the kind of giant culture that existed, perhaps many cycles ago, this kind of titanic idea of mankind and man and beast. I just love that imagery. Many parts of Wisconsin, particularly the region traversed by the military road from Prairie du Chien to Four Lakes, abound with these strange mounds. They occupy the hilltops and the gentle slopes into the valleys, with their backs placed uniformly towards the tops of the hills, and their feet towards the bottom. They are of vast dimensions, some of them being more than 100 feet in length. The Indians of the country know nothing of them. They are covered with tall grasses and trees. The animals, where several are seen together, are represented with their heads in the same direction, as if following one another. The outlines are so distinctly marked that the legs, heads, ears, or antlers and tail can be distinctly traced. The height of the animals above the general level of the country is about 3 feet. Now, imagine how deep these things go, right? We've talked about how the history of these things goes far back, and that many of the cultures living on top of the soil in these time frames, 17, 16, 17, 1800s, know nothing of their creation. And they lie 3 feet above the surface. They without a doubt, go several feet below. These strange remains are known in Wisconsin by the name of effigies. Some account of them was given several years ago in the Asylums journal by a Mr. Taylor, who states that there were also effigies of birds and of men to be seen on the hillsides in bas relief. Very recent travelers in that region give the same account and also state that there are to be seen lizards and tortoises. Mr. D.D. Owen has also communicated to Congress in his report of geological exploration of a part of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois a brief account of these mysterious relics, giving accurate lithographic views of some of them. What these strange objects are, no one can say, but they are artificial, there could be no doubt. It would be a strange freak indeed of nature if these figures of earth were only the result of a fortuitous concourse of matter. As yet, these strange figures have received but little attention, and it is probable that an extensive and careful investigation will bring to light some curious facts concerning them. Absolutely. Again, 1846. I've talked about these effigy mounds and their kind of totem clan relation that many different tribes, quote, tribes, cultures, clans, kind of even going back into the, quote, Israelite biblical time frames, that these totem symbols designated different tribes. And yeah, the totem stuff goes very much westward into my home state, up into Alaska, Montana, and into across the Bering Strait into Russia, China. Very Tartarian, these totems. But yeah, I just love how that article started. Kind of a good refresher and a good synopsis of much of the work I put together. So yeah, remember where we were on the Rock Lake and the Aztalan stuff, right? And we were talking about how important that is. And I had shared a few newspaper articles as well as book excerpts, and we dabbled in that a little bit. So I think we're going to spend probably the next 30 minutes at least talking about Aztalan, or what was called Aztalan, and kind of breaking down what it could have been, how important it is, how rare of a example of building it is. And yeah, so we'll jump in there next. We'll kind of just see what's going on in chat. Lucy Rose. Up trains ruled recently full of iron ore up the peninsula. The copper in this area is usually accompanied by silver. Glad to catch up. Good to see you, Lucy. Crap tons of trains full of ore all the way up. Diamonds. Ancient Labyrinth, Homer's Greeks. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, showing the relation between, again, that's kind of what I've been doing is rewriting these historical narratives, or kind of changing the way we look at them, as far as, the idea of what's Greek, what's Roman. That many of the authors and archaeologists in these time periods were saying we need to rethink what we designate as the old world, because it appears that America is the treasure trove, and it needs to be rebranded. Brian, what luck the military road connected so many amazing sites. Yeah. No, yeah. So again, military, I've kind of showed, again, quite often throughout these, that like with Rock Island, we talked about Rock Island in my last episode. We talked about it in my Illinois episode, and how incredibly important Rock Island was. And that it was kind of like this hub of directional trade between Western America and northern all the way up to the Great Lakes, and that Rock Island housed this incredible temple site below Rock Island. And of course, it's now American arsenal, and the military took it over, right? And that this happens over and over again, that these military bases occupy these sacred places. You can take this all the way into my video on deep underground military bases being old world subterranean highways, thoroughfares, mines, cities that people were living in even up until the 1800s, and described several different classes of humans, dwarfs, giants, on and on and on. Not to get too far off there, but yeah, the military, the Civil War, all of these things, World War I and II, I described them as kind of a cleanup crew for a lot of the stuff that the remnants of these lost times. What else? Man, I wouldn't think to go to Wisconsin or the Midwest in general, but now, well, yeah, I mean, every state. This is every state. I want to inspire people to realize what exists on their own soil, that this is all across the realm, that you wouldn't believe what lies 3, 5, 10 feet below your feet right now. Any of you, it's pretty incredible. Pick the closest large city, and I guarantee you its foundations are set on top of an older generation. That's pretty much been 90% of the cities I've covered throughout these episodes have very ancient roots. There's definitely stuff buried under those mounds. I've been there, and the area is quite large. Yeah, and because of them being classified as burials, that essentially destroys the opportunity for anything else to be uncovered. When they do large excavations, which this has happened tons of times, they find that often it's a structure, not just a burial, and that they're very large. Again, just go back to Colorado and New Mexico and Arizona, and you can see the buildings they were finding. That just, 3 to 10 feet of the top of the building was on the surface, and it led them to uncover buildings, the largest buildings ever found in the realm, the world, whatever you want to call it. We're in Colorado, New Mexico. New Mexico, they found a building with 3,000 rooms. Colorado, they found a stone building 6 miles long, on and on and on. So again, any of you new listeners, I strongly suggest my American Southwest episodes. I love all of them, but the stuff they're finding there is insane. And yeah, it's every state, but the really crazy, gigantic stuff is all across the American Southwest. What does the government have to gain by hiding this from us? Well, that's absolutely for you to decide. I think manipulating history and changing how you look at the past is going to absolutely dictate what shapes the future. But I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I just want to present this information because I find it interesting, and that's all that I'm looking to do is in some ways spark an interest and provide some entertainment, not project any opinions or anything like that. Thanks for the question, James. So what is America? Great question. Like all of the realm, what is this world we inhabit? It's quite a wormhole, and it's certainly, it's a journey that you have to go on yourself, because I don't want to convince anybody of anything. America is a very ancient place with civilizations that have been wiped and cleared and laid dirt upon, and then another comes in and builds another civilization over and over and over, is what seems to be the case. They won't let you dig, that's for sure. There are Roman columns the ocean has exposed in our little coastal town. What an incredible time to be alive. Yeah, absolutely. Living in Santa Fe. Yeah. Check out my New Mexico episode, Brian. I think you'll love it. The stuff they find there is unbelievable in the 1800s. Hello from St. Paul, Minnesota. Old world is everywhere. Absolutely. Marlene, it is. It's everywhere. Yep. As above, so underground. Couldn't have said it better myself, old world. Yeah. Madison, Wisconsin for 8 years, born, raised Green Bay. The evidence is overwhelming. Yep. Welcome. So many Wisconsin people from Wisconsin. That's great. Oh, okay. I'm gonna get back to the material. Sorry if I miss any questions or anything. I'm gonna do a better job of trying to go through that stuff. This is a very long. It's a full page article. This is from 1843. Very special. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I'm using this mostly to show the survey of the land in 1843. The survey was actually done in 1839, but this publication again is 1843. This is the Crawfish River, and this is the fort. And outside of this fort, they found hundreds of stone buildings and dozens of burials, but hundreds of stone buildings. They found highways. They found all kinds of stonework, mines, not just the thoroughfare, but we'll get into what authors conceived of as this being kind of think of this like the Federal Reserve mint, that all of the incoming minerals, not just copper, but they were making high quality bronze and silver here, and that this was like the smelting plant, and that when everything was smelted or broken down into bars or however they transported it, it would then leave here and make its way out into the Gulf and all across the world. I'm trying to remember exactly what I wanted to highlight here, because this would take over an hour to read. Perhaps I'll do a separate little recording for just this one article. I think that'd probably be worth it. Yeah. All right. This is a good one, and not nearly as long. And then we can get into some books that kind of go deeper into this idea of Aztalan. So it's spelled Azatlan, and it's also spelled Aztlan. Kind of again that Atlan Ats root that exists all across North America, Central America, connecting it with that infamous Atlantis. The prehistoric relics discovered near Salielo on the Columbia, and which recently attracted so much interest, seem overshadowed by a greater find that has been made in Wisconsin. Hopefully you can see that okay. A ancient ceremonial city, now known as Aztalan, has revealed traces of having been inhabited by a people of relatively high culture. Some interesting facts about the ancient city are contained in a story in the Dearborn Independent. As the excavations progress and one truth is piled upon another, belief comes an established fact that at Aztalan, Wisconsin, there once gathered at this ceremonial Mecca Indian tribes from the entire Northwest, perhaps as our ancestors crowded in the Crusades to the Holy Land. Here, their greatest upper Mississippi Valley earthworks were built. Basketful of earth upon basketful from the surrounding fields, almost the task of an age when such simple methods of transportation must be utilized. Here center all the old Indian trails to other localities. Here are still to be found unmistakable evidences of courtly scenes and inspiring religious ceremonies, and gruesome evidence of human sacrifice. Probably war captives were boiled in kettles, devoured in cannibalistic fashion, and their broken bones heaped in the camp refused with those of fish and animals. For 80 years, Aztalan has been a strange name to conjure with. It was named by the first discoverer, who believed that it must have been a deserted village of the Aztecs. In 1838, it lacked only 2 votes of being chosen as the capital seat of Wisconsin. Can you imagine? I mean, how did that not become? Wouldn't that have been incredible if that would be the capital of Wisconsin today? Yeah, they had to keep that kind of covered up. Then came, again, hopefully you guys can see this okay. The quality on this PDF is garbage, so I'm doing the best I can. There's stuff I can't read, so I apologize for the stumbling. Then came Irene A. Lapham, scientist, father of the Weather Bureau, and with chain and compass gathered some of the material facts about Aztalan, which, when published, made to deserted village famous even in Europe as among the Western world's antiquities. It is said that until recently, scholars in foreign countries have actually shown more interest in Aztalan mounds than people of Wisconsin themselves. I mean, that's been a tale as old as this American Anomalous America series, is that when you look at who's stealing these relics, the Smithsonian obviously is a big culprit, but even they were known to be shipping quote relics to Europe. That look at again, going back to my Anomalous America Colorado episode, the governor of Colorado was pleading with the federal government, saying that these European groups, Germans to be one, there were many others, French, were stealing mummies, all kinds of stuff, literally taking stones, tearing buildings down. I believe in my New Mexico episode, I talk about a prince. I want to say he was Swedish, but I can't remember. A prince was arrested stealing a mummy and artifacts. So Europeans were coming to America in the 1800s and stealing all kinds of stuff, or buying it if they couldn't steal it. The late Professor James D. Butter of the University of Wisconsin, in an series of historical articles, refers to the fact that when traveling in Europe, he met more inquiries regarding Wisconsin's greatest Aboriginal ruin than he met in his own state. Like the more famous Indian earthworks, the establishment of Aztalan was erected on a beautiful water scene. The main enclosure was a huge parallelogram with the Rock River on one of its sides. The north wall was 831 feet. The west, opposite the river, 1,419 feet, and the south, 792 feet. A field of nearly 18 acres. The wall width is given as more than 22 feet, and the height more than 5 feet. Now, later, as we go into this material farther, you'll see they excavated, and they never found the bottom of this fort. Like many of these large walls, they get wider as they go down, and they rarely find the bottom. So how deep does this fort really go underground? We'll never know. I never found any conclusive evidence, but it went down at least 3 stories, at least 30 feet. So we have the wall above ground as being 1 to 5 feet. I'd estimate it's probably closer to 40 or 50 feet. The wall width along the outer edge of its entire length were rounded projections, which have been frequently referred to as buttresses or bastions, but which scientists have since determined were never designed for either of the purposes indicated by the names. Inside the enclosure, and this goes back to when we talk about star forts too, that many of them, the ongoing story is that the French built them leading up to the Civil War and before that, and that they were strategic military positions. I strongly disagree with that. I believe that they were designed for many purposes, number one being water control, and that later on they were repurposed for military and strategic positioning. Inside the enclosure within the northwest and north-southeast angles were 2 flat-topped rectangular truncated pyramidal mounds, the level tops measuring from 6 to 65 feet. Also within were a number of excavations besides conical mounds, embankments, and other earthworks, some of which our present knowledge enables us to identify as very probably effigy or emblematic mounds. Now, again, why would you build a structure like this around a burial mound? That's not at all what these were. And as we get farther into this, we'll talk more about the idea again of this being a smelting and trade outpost. Outside the enclosure were originally 71 mounds and a number of embankments, all located on the west bank of the river. while on the east bank of the river were formerly 2 long embankments, 2 small enclosures, and 22 mounds. All these were apparently directly connected with the enclosure. Yeah, directly connected, because again, take the surface, take the mud, take the earth down 5, 10, 20, 30 feet, and these mounds, I believe, are structures. Certainly, were burials found on the tops of some of these? Absolutely. But I believe they go far deeper underground. While the enclosures were were directly connected with the enclosure, and the whole together formed a unique but one of the largest and one of the most important of many ancient earthworks of America. Yeah, so again, reading between the lines, they're basically telling you that the tips of these things sticking out of the ground was one large structure that were all interconnected underneath the ground. The scientists who have investigated the ground carefully assert their belief that the walls of Aztalan were not intended for defensive purposes in war, but rather as part of the setting for great religious ceremonies carried on by the prehistoric inhabitants. If we could, by some miraculous process, draw back the veil by which the past is hidden, with what scenes might we be regaled? Okay, thanks for sticking with me through that one. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. And then we'll go deeper into Rock Lake and kind of make the Atlantis Phoenician connections that I was discussing earlier. Ellis Island Star Fort portal. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the forts in New York, they're as old as every map of New York. The oldest maps, even in the 1700s, late 1600s, show the forts. Napoleon was in Egypt and America at about the same time. Yeah. I mean, Napoleon read backwards is just a solar. You could just say he was a solar deity, describing his marches of the sun. The Hopi people have an origin story that includes the living underground before emerging into the world. According to the story, the Hopi met Masa, the creator and caretaker of the earth. Yeah, so many of these cultures have the same story. I covered the Mandan story quite intensely, that they climbed the giant beanstalk, or corn stalk as they called it, to the surface, where they broke through a crusted layer and found themselves in a new world. And they were, through some disaster, they no longer had their connection to the stalk and could no longer go back to where they came from, which was underground. Star forts every 1,400 miles. I have posts on Twitter of old horn maps that show all of the river systems, the Mississippi, the Missouri, on and on and on, especially the eastern maps, our eastern waterways, were covered in star forts. I mean, covered, dozens and dozens and dozens. Pre-Civil War maps show hundreds of star forts. They've all been covered up or buried by some kind of event or flood, or who knows, mud flood, whatever you want to call it. Many different types of events. All right, we're going to go a little deeper into the wall, the ancient wall, talking again a little bit more about Aztalan here. I just wanted to talk where they go into do they talk about, I had a special one where they describe the composition of the bricks and how it is directly related to what they call the brick of the Israelite. Was the same idea as they describe these straw-laden bricks in biblical descriptions. Nope. And for the sake of time, we're just going to skip it. Okay, this one I want to cover because it kind of correlates with my mummy corn material. Aztalan relics. The Evening Wisconsin of a recent issue contained the following article and correspondence regarding the ruins of Aztalan, which will be of interest to the people of this county. On the on the opening of a mound at Aztalan, Jefferson County, a small earthen jar was found near the bones of a mound builder. The condition of the bones was such as to indicate that they had lain there 1,000 years. Very little was left of the skull. In the jar were found a few seeds. They were about the size of a small grain of wheat, egg-shaped and somewhat fluted. Miss McComb of Aztalan sent in some of the seeds to John W. Dunlop of this city, with the request that he give her the name of the plant of which they were seeds. He soaked them in hot water, after which it was seen that they had a sort of gum on them. He sowed them and was quite surprised to have germinate. He expects to be able to name the plant when it completes its growth. Now it looks like grass. The question of how long seeds will retain their germinating power is very interesting. Blah, blah, blah. So this kind of goes on. We covered the correspondence between how often these, quote, mummy seeds were found, and that it's kind of found all over the world, China, Russia. They covered many of them in Alaska, Arizona. Corn, grain, barley, wheat have all been found in these jars with these buried people, all of which have been successfully grown. Which brings up an interesting correlation here, because Wisconsin is like the home of beer, and they had more breweries in one state than all of America at one point. And the oldest inscription or drawing of barley being used, quote, to make mead or beer is an Egyptian one found in Egypt. And it just makes you wonder, I'm sure they were making beer with barley here in the Americas long ago. Okay, I want to get deeper into, I'm not going to have time to go through this whole book here, but Rock Lake's Stellar Pyramids. You can find this for free on Google Books if you want to read about it some more. Here is a LiDAR of Rock Lake with the pyramid here. I know it's hard to see, but again, you can go look for this on your own. And where are we going to jump into? It's a specific part I wanted to read. Okay, yeah. So we're going to go through this a little bit. Then we're going to jump into this book, Atlantis in Wisconsin, where we're going to talk a little bit more about Lake Tyrrhenia and make correlations between Cahokia, show some of the kind of astrological relations, talk about, the Phoenicians and Atlantis in Wisconsin. And then we'll finish up that with ancient Sac, Aztalan, Cahokia, Phoenicians, Egypt, and copper. Okay, Rock Lake is a small body of water located 30 miles east. Yep, we covered that. My apologies. During the last century, there has been sightings of underwater conical rock towers, circular chimney stone cairns, and pyramidal formations. So, conical rock towers, circular chimneys, Celtic round tower style, and stone cairns, and pyramidal formations. More recently, delta, man, turtle, and bear or panther-shaped stone mounds and stone dragon relief have been sighted by divers and recorded on underwater side-scan sonar imagery. The most spectacular of these include several flat-top, tiered, and tent-shaped pyramidal structures. So again, there's not just the one giant pyramid. There are countless things underwater in this lake. These are numerous verbal and written accounts that describe Rock Lake's underwater structures. The most recent in-depth published studies include texts from Frank Joseph and Archie Eschborn. These books contain detailed diving formation and side-scan underwater sonar readings, historical data, logical legends, and various hypotheses about the site's formation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, underwater side-scan sonar readings were taken of Rock Lake's structures by numerous diving crews. One set of side-scan sonar readings, taken under the direction of University of Wisconsin civil engineering professor Jim Schertz, were presented to the State Historical Society of Wisconsin officials for consideration. However, they were quickly dismissed as natural rock formations. Of course they were. And they refused to do any further funded studies. A close examination of Rock Lake's underwater structures from these sonar readings allows for both logical and global comparison, local. A brief rock lake map overview is necessary to explain the data. Blah, blah, blah. So they go up and down from north to south. This previously unpublished image is a rare glimpse into Native American antiquity, extremely sacred site. It is perhaps the source for Egyptian Osage and Sac creation, ceremonial and futuristic legends, composed of Portland quartzite rock combined with crushed up sea cell cement terramar. The pyramid was then assembled with hand-hewn bricks. Although the truncated pyramid was terminated, the Temple of the Moon by authors, divers, and local natives. That is not the structure's original name. Again, I'm highlighting things here because like I stated, you can read the entire book and it pretty much goes into as much depth as you can imagine. The information based on the aerial sonar image suggests that the complete Temple of the Sun structure is a rectangular and squared shaped building with a notch in its lower southwest corner. The length of the submerged in the muck Temple of the Sun may exceed 100 feet and its width measured 20 feet. The structure's aerial sonar view was sketched by Dr. Schertz. The aerial sonar reading taken by Dr. Schertz offers a more complete view of the Temple of the Sun by capturing the outline of the larger structure buried in the mud. Although the reading indicates the Temple of the Sun is an elongated, rectangular, and square-shaped building, only the temple's truncated pyramidal top is visible in the side view. The rest of the structure lies buried beneath Rock Lake's murky bottom. This may confuse the reader, as in the Trusty site comparison are made not only of the temple's truncated side view, but also the Temple of the Sun's long hall. The stone conical tower, one of 4 found on Rock Lake's bottom, has a parallel pole component in the Ojibwe Medewegan ceremony, similar to the Egyptian benben or bull pole dage column and the painted cedar pole in the Ojibwe medicine lodge link creation to man's earthly appearance. In both religions, the pole or column is associated with the soul's travel during creation and temple initiation and is utilized in temple ceremonies. There is a discrepancy in 2 published texts regarding the labeling of these underwater artifacts. In Frank Joseph's 1995 text entitled Atlantis in Wisconsin, the Temple of the Moon Sun is also called the Liminatis Mound, and there is only one 10-shaped rock structure termed the Kennedy Mound. However, in Archie Echbrone's 2000, that's the Dragon in the Lake, okay, completely nearby above-ground earthen pyramids are found at Aztalan, a site less than 3 miles from Rock Lake. The site contains 2 earthen truncated step pyramidal mounds, labeled Temple of the Sun and Moon, respectively. The Temple of the Sun was excavated in the 30s by S. Barrett and later reassembled. Aztalan was a copper melting site. From Aztalan Temple of the Sun's top platform, one can view a winter solstice alignment. Again, kind of going into more of what I was saying earlier, that author was saying that he doesn't believe that the structure was built or designed as a defensive outpost. I think a lot of these buildings are astrological, and this author agrees. One can view winter solstice alignment of the December 21st sunrise over a red cedar marker pole placed on Christmas Hill, just across the Crawfish River. Aztalan Temple of the Moon is smaller in size. These earthen pyramids were built hundreds of years after Rock Lake's stone structures during the Woodland era, according to Wisconsin archaeological records. I'm going to call it there on this book. Again, if you want to go deeper, it's called Rock Lake's Stellar Pyramids. And then we're going to read a little bit from Atlantis in Wisconsin. And we're going to finish the connection here to Rock Lake, and then we'll get into a capital of the empire. Where are we at? 6:03. Perfect. About 15 more minutes on this subject here, and then we'll do some correlations with the Phoenicians and Atlantis as well. Looking at chat. Okay, why are there so many German Americans in America but so little representation culturally? Yeah, well, what is Germany before World War One? That in itself is a very interesting subject. Mount Stake Part is definitely an enclosure with a structure a few football fields wide and with a wall around it. Deep underground. Went there every year on a field trip. Yep. I mean, you guys just have to imagine that the whole realm was covered in something. You know, the mud flood is the common uh, caption used, but it wasn't just one event. There were several events. I have quite a few videos on this showing that we're talking about cities on cities on cities, and that's not just one cultural layer. It's several in some cases, up to 4 or 5 even. Apparently, southwestern Mississippi had an encampment during the 1940s for Germans. Round Rock Towers in Wisconsin, same as the rock towers found in Galena Canyon, New Mexico. Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe we can leave the atmosphere. Well, makes 2 of us. Okay. And again, thanks for everybody for being here. 160 of you. It's good to be first episode back in 3 months and see so many people showing up. I really appreciate it. We're gonna breeze through this stuff here. Links to Rock Lake. So again, Rock Lake being very close to Aztalan, okay? The enormous masses of stone placed in an upright position by the hand of man were undoubtedly the same kind of pyramidal structures identically encountered by divers under Tyrrhenia, defining a line of cultural continuity stretching from the lake to Michigan's ancient copper mines. Right. Again, remember they classified it as the military highway, but it's the ancient highway, okay? It is intriguing to imagine that at least one of the underwater pyramids might have been its own Tartar inscription, a find that would blow the lid off American archaeology. Now, again, we've been making this Tartar connection for a very, very long time, trying to make this visible enough for all of y'all. What is a Tartar, right? That's just everything outside of all the heathens that didn't submit to Rome were called Tartars at one point. This cultural continuity linking southern Wisconsin to upper Great Lakes was additionally reinforced in its Rock Lake identity by Michigan's ridge top mounds made of fitted stones, similar to the subsurface Lamantis Pyramid, a gigantic linear mound 60 feet below the surface in the north central quadrant. Again, a gigantic linear mound 60 feet below the surface. They were known to exist in Michigan's Romeo and Macomb counties until the close of the last century, when they were referred to by locals as rock haycocks. Although just 5 feet high, they stood only little more than a mile from a set of earthworks not unlike those behind the walls of Aztalan. Right, so like I had mentioned earlier, here we have one that's 60 feet below the surface, gigantic linear mound, stone, fitted stones. 5 feet above the surface showing. So how big is this thing? Well, in some cases, then it's 65 feet of wall or structure of fitted stone, minimum. In some cases, much larger. Excavations of one of the rock haycocks revealed extended human skeletons, recalling Wisconsin's Pyramid of the Moon with its 10 full-length burials. 6 miles from Michigan's Black River is an enclosure surrounding numerous conical mounds, mostly 5 feet tall and all constructed of undressed river stones. And I know we're talking a little bit about Michigan and Wisconsin, so it's going to be a bit of both. Just keep that in mind. At least one of the ridgetop mounds at the bottom of Rock Lake was made of river stones, fitted together and bonded by a cement-like coating of mixed lime, the same substance taken from subsurface structures in Rock Lake. So we have two similar compounds and constructions, one in the lake, one outside the lake. These upper peninsula pyramidal mounds of rough stone run in a straight line from Michigan's prehistoric copper mining district to Rock Lake. Think about that, guys. So when they describe it as a military highway, you mean the military took over this ancient highway. And then it goes from Isle Royal all the way to Aztalan or Rock Lake. And then it's dotted with these stone structures all along the way. They established an identifiable connection linking the two areas, and in so doing explain both their function and the reason for their once formidable numbers. The mining season in the Great Lakes region was strictly circumscribed by brutal and sudden weather conditions. The ancient miners had only 3 months to extract the tons of copper they desired so passionately. Too early an arrival or too long a stay would not spell hardship alone, but death. Negotiating the treacherous waters around Isle Royal outside the midsummer sailing season in vessels heavily laden with cargoes of raw copper would have been very risky. The miners, cone-shaped pyramids that formerly dotted the landscape from northern Michigan into Rock Lake, were timekeepers, sundials, and star pointers upon whose sharply cast shadows and celestial alignments the ancient inhabitants kept a weary eye. As soon as the structures indicated the onset of fall, the miners shut down their mining season and cleared out of the Upper Peninsula. Their short digging period explains the obvious haste for their operations. They had to get as much copper out as quickly as possible, then head south from the imminent bad weather. Appropriately, Rock Lake Aztalan lies just below the hard snow line. Only 50 miles north, the winters are remarkably more severe. Rock Lake was an ancient mining center, a clearinghouse where raw copper extracted from the Great Lakes region was readied for shipment elsewhere, and a home for the miners until they could return to Michigan the following summer. Again, remember how they described all of the stone buildings surrounding that central fort that wasn't for military purposes? This is a mining camp, a mining operation, surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of stone buildings. I'm sure the homes of these miners. Precisely regulating all the stages of procedure in those widespread operations involved thousands of miners, handlers, sailors, overseers, and workers of all kinds, together with an efficient calendrical technology that was vital to success and survival. Hence the abundance of astronomically significant structures stretching from Rock Lake to the Upper Peninsula. When prehistoric America's copper mining ceased all at once in 1200 BC, again, probably some kind of event. I wouldn't say it was a war. It could have been. This event could have kicked off a war, but I think it was more likely a cataclysm of some kind. They were suddenly reopened in AD 900. That's quite a long stretch of time. An event which can only mean that despite the virtual abandonment of Rock Lake area for thousands of years, it was continuously held in profound awe by numerous successive generations, among whose mythology the lake had achieved a powerfully sacred status that continues to this day in oral traditions of such widespread tribes as the Menominee and the Sioux. From Michigan to Peru. The date for reopening Michigan's mines is enormously significant because it coincides with the establishment of Cahokia. Now remember, again, anyone that's new, go back and watch my Illinois and my Missouri episodes, because as I stated there, that was like a central hub, if not the main hub for this same. You could think of Aztalan as a mining center, but its main thoroughfare connection is St. Louis, Mound City, and Cahokia. A massive underground, huge complex of the biggest pyramidal structures in America. The greatest city in ancient North America above the Rio Grande. The overlords of Cahokia were as interested in copper as their 14th century BC descendants in Wisconsin. Their pyramidal burials in south central Illinois, prehistoric megalopolis, are rich in copper armor and ornaments. But personal wealth accounted for only a small fraction of the tons of the imported mineral. Alliance with another mound-building people at Spiro, Oklahoma, near the Arkansas River, provided portage to Mesoamerica's trade centers. The Spiro seamen operated three-masted, 30-foot-long wooden-hull vessels plying the Gulf of Mexico to Florida and Veracruz. Cahokia, like older Rock Lake, Tyrrhenia, had its astronomers, whose wood henge, a precisely arranged circle of 20-foot tall, red painted cedar post, calculated the positions of the sun. Thus provided with accurate celestial information, they knew when to dispatch their mining expeditions to the Upper Peninsula. Doubtless, the site chosen for the foundation of Cahokia had been determined by its central location at the hub of trade routes converging from all over the continent. When Cahokian society collapsed in AD 1100, much of its culture-bearing population migrated naturally to Rock Lake area in order to get as close as possible to the copper-bearing regions, because the mineral had become their chief trade good with the Toltec civilization of Mexico. Commercial routes traveling by Spiro sailors may have even extended as far as South America. The Andean civilizations of the Chimu and other pre-Inca peoples used copper on a grand scale, although proportionate supplies did not occur in Peru. Exactly. And there's tons of evidence now, many books written about this, that Michigan copper is without a doubt been found on every continent. And all the major civilizations in these time periods were wearing or trading copper from this region. Referring to the implements first encountered by Columbus during his fourth voyage to the New World, Dyer writes that the copper from which these tools, scattered over such a vast area of country, were manufactured, came from the ancient mines of Lake Superior, does not admit of doubt. Although large and numerous deposits of copper ore are scattered through Arizona, New Mexico, and Central and South America, there is no evidence that the Aborigines had sufficient metallurgical knowledge or skill to reduce the ores to refined copper. The shores of Lake Superior have the only known workable deposits of native copper in the world. The term virgin copper is well used to denote its purity. In this latter day, it outranks all others in the markets of the world. Archaeological excavations in the 1930s at Aztalan unearthed the remains of a large rectangular building containing an abundance of unworked copper, establishing the site's identity as a mining town. A long, broad roll of matting for storage had been thoroughly stained with green impregnations from the minerals as they oxidize over time. The building's 8-inch thick walls were curved slightly and ran between two large furnaces or fire pits, all suggesting that the copper was cast into ingots before shipment. As long ago as 1936, so-called Indian shafts were observed on the floor of Rock Lake. Again, in the early 1990s, divers found several unusually large depressions at the bottom, usually, if not always, near a stone monument. Imagine, before Rock Lake was filled with water, what it was like. Unbelievable. Columns, towers, pyramids. Crazy. Can you imagine? Although they resemble pits dug by the ancient miners of Isle Royal, their depths are indeterminable because they are largely filled in with mud and shifting silt. No one has so far been able to define what natural process might be responsible for these strange depressions, which have all the earmarks of man-made features and compare almost exactly in circumference to the Aztalan furnaces or fire pits. A capital of empire. I think we'll end this book with this little chapter here. We'll do a quick synopsis of this book. Then what do we have? We'll skip that. We'll talk a little bit about some of the antiquities. And I want to talk about Redhorn. So we'll finish with Redhorn. Okay. 178. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Better late than never. Hope you're enjoying the material. Missed you guys. Let's see if we got anything here. Deluge, Old World Mech. Absolutely. Deluge, 100%. Mines is in Phoenix. Okay, I'm not sure. Gigi, good to see you. They found where they were pouring out the ingots of copper shaped like cow hides and round ones. Neo Drifter, awesome tuning in. Crazy history rewrite needed. Neo, thanks. Thank you. Good to see you again. Nothing to find. Cahokia society was massively unurbanized. Those people knew how to build and maintain cities. 100%. My Arkansas episode, I talk about an even larger city, believe it or not. They estimate millions of people. Um, Yay, Michigan. We get around. Yeah. Yep. We'll get deeper into Michigan. Da, 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 da. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm glad you like it. Check out my other videos if you haven't. You'll enjoy those as well. A capital of empire. Ancient minds explain why a civilization at Rock Lake came about. Tyrrhenia was the pivot point and crossroads of the prehistoric copper trade. The raw minerals were extracted from the Michigan pits during the short summer season and transported to Rock Lake via the direct routes. I kind of showed a synopsis of this in a previous post, but we're going to get deeper. The ancient inhabitants of Rock Lake were, in fact, the same people who mined copper in the Upper Peninsula. There could be a little doubt. While no burials exist throughout their vast mining district around the shores of Rock Lake, were more than 70 grave mounds containing the remains of unknown thousands of ancient dead. Some interred, many more cremated. Among the best preserved examples were bones of man accompanied by a pebble hammer of the exact kind found throughout Isle Royal. Such tools were used to finish the extracted copper, flattening spurs and trimming off sharp edges. I covered that already. If the dates for America's prehistoric mining coincide with the submerged stone structures, which I believe they do, the period when operations resumed even more closely fits the life of Aztalan, whose demise took place at the same moment the mine ceased functioning. But if the Toltecs of Middle America and possibly the Andean civilizers of South America were the Aztlaners, customers in the 10th through 14th centuries who wanted Michigan's copper in far greater quantities more than 2,000 years before. The Paleo Indians who sparsely populated the Great Lake regions could have made no demand for the mineral beyond occasional fragments. Superior technology. Certainly, the most astounding aspects of the Upper Peninsula operations were their vast scope. The prodigious quantities extracted, the advanced procedures of labor, organization, shipping, and the actual mining itself, all at a period when the great nations of the earth included Pharaonic Egypt, Trojan Anatolia, Mycenaean Greece, Minoan Crete, and the Hittite Empire of Asia Minor. And that's again why we keep coming back to this, the quote Phoenicians and the kind of Atlantis, the vague Atlantis correlation, because all of these cultures are related in one way or another. And America played a very, very important role in that. And I think was the key hub to these European, Asiatic, South American cultures. The American miners were using crib lifts to hoist more than 3 tons of rock at a time and highly efficient prospecting methods superior to late 18th century British technology. They were able to cut straight down into 60 feet of solid rock and organize a hierarchy of tasks for thousands of workers. Add to these civilized skills practical astronomy, shipbuilding, and navigation, and we begin to appreciate the greatness of this unknown people. There is, moreover, no indication of a gradual progressive evolution of all these disciplines and accomplishment in ancient Michigan. Again, really important. Let me read that again. There is, moreover, no indication of a gradual progressive evolution of all these disciplines and accomplishments in ancient Michigan. They suddenly appeared already fully developed and operational in 3000 BCs. How is that possible? An epoch considered the very dawn of civilization when only 3 nations existed on the planet: in the Nile Valley, and Mesopotamia's Fertile Crescent, and in the valley of the Indus River. Now, again, I think those 3 civilizations spurred from America. And, dozens and dozens of videos I've covered this subject and shown evidences. All of my work with Dr. Longo of Old World, Florida, showing that Mesopotamia is a second degree phase of Mesopotamia, and that the true Fertile Crescent is the Gulf of Mexico, and that is Atlantis. Atlantis. Remember, Atlantis to the learned Mason is America. They created the myth of Atlantis to hide America's origins. This is written in Masonic literature, and I've covered several times. That's also why they kind of hide the idea or rewrote the historical narratives of who the Phoenicians really were. In other words, a society at least on par with these earliest cultures was already functioning at a feverish pace in the Great Lakes region centuries before the Trojan War. It is apparent, too, that the miners brought their technology from outside. Development did not take place in the Upper Peninsula. Now, it's also my assertion, as I've talked about several times, again, going back to the Dr. Longo stuff, talking about the shrinking of the glacial period. They followed the glacial period and took over these areas that they knew were there and existed before this event that kickstarted the Ice Age. The Ice Age is much closer to our timeline than we think. Much, much closer. Nothing resembling more than the simplest human societies existed elsewhere in North America at the time, while the ancient miners' identification is the essential question of the great copper mystery. Major clues do exist. Their activities in Michigan parallel exactly the European Bronze Age. The American mines shut down the moment the epoch came to a close. 1.5 billion pounds of copper extracted from the Upper Peninsula simply disappeared. As Dew Temple writes, where this copper went is still a mystery. Perhaps it went across the sea to the metalsmiths of pre-classical Europe, where it was shipped, and the imported Michigan copper was combined with tin and zinc to make bronze. Remember, the most ancient and perfected versions of bronze are found also here in the Americas. California, Arizona, again, those episodes, Alaska as well. Dr. James Schertz, professor of civil engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, asks, one of the basic questions that hasn't been basically answered yet is, where did all the copper from the Lake Superior go? All of the copper found in the mounds, although of a large amount, is but a small percentage of that mined. The Europeans have a complementary problem. Where did all their copper come from? The Europeans were in a copper trading frenzy from 2000 to 1000 BC, like we are about oil now, because copper drove their economy. To be sure, bronze was the most valuable, sought after material because it was the basis of all weapons production, from swords, spear points, and shields to armor, helmets, and battery rams. As such, it was really more important and certainly more useful than gold. The magnitude of the operation in the Michigan mines would indicate a strong metallurgically oriented culture. Du Temple concludes there was undoubtedly a great economic demand to support this operation with men, material, food, and transportation. Such effort was probably not put forth to secure copper for trinkets and ornaments, but rather for working tools, probably for armaments, and to exchange in trade. Yeah, it was the currency of the world, without a doubt. I'm going to stop there. I want to go further. There's so much more, but for the sake of time, I'm going to stop for this book here. Again, Atlantis in Wisconsin, for those of you that want to read further. I'm ending right here at Bronze Age America, page 20. I want to read a little bit from this. This is Ancient Sac Ojibwe. What is it? Oh, I've messed that up. Shoot. Apologies. By Dr. J. Price. Appreciate all of you guys. Blah, 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 blah. Anything to see here in chat? Water control, yes. Yeah, absolutely. The Mississippi and the Missouri River have more ancient dams and spillways and canals that fed Arizona. Again, Arizona is the most canaled area of land in the world. And the canals were built so perfectly in Arizona that they dug them out and they still use them today. The technology and the construction techniques outlasted time. The ones that we unearthed, we use still many of them today. And we disassembled the buildings and repurposed the stone in many cases. Again, Chapter 6, Aztalan, Cahokia, Phoenicians, Egypt, and copper. A recent theory suggests that there were two waves of Mississippian copper trade, one during ancient times, 3000 to 1200 BC, and the other from 900 to 1200 AD. With the rebuilding of copper, and this is, I think, separated by some kind of cataclysmic event. The 3000 to 1200 BC, I think, is actually a smaller window and kicks off as the glacial drift moves farther north. Remember, the Phoenicians were the ones controlling the trade between the Fertile Crescent, which is the Gulf of Mexico, Mesopotamia, and the trade route that was kept open in this glacial drift by the waterway. I'm spacing the name of it. My apologies. The waterway that connects the warm water with the Gulf and the Baltic Ocean. Can't believe I'm spacing it. But there was a channel free of ice maintained throughout this glacial period by the warm waters. And it was like a highway of trade. It connected the Baltic, Gotland, the most important trading island, with Mesoamerica and the Gulf of Mexico. From Gotland, this copper was distributed in Ireland, Scotland, all of the excuse me, the northern regions, and all the way southward down into the into quote Mesopotamia. With the rebuilding of copper refining sites like Aztalan and Cahokia along the Midwestern waterways, a closer explanation of these sites document international trade and depict global mythology. According to Winnebago legend, Aztalan was ruled by tall, light-skinned people that came up from the south to mine copper and trade artifacts. Aztalan's 21 acres were surrounded with a tall wood and white plaster fence containing 150 guard towers, 1,200 warriors who protected a city of 10,000 people. Excuse me. You can tell I haven't done a talk like this in so long. I can't keep up. Inside the complex lie the Temple of the Sun and the Moon, flat-top pyramidal mounds that house buildings on top and measured astronomical events. And remember, as we read in the last book, that they dug down 20 feet and found a whole storage room full of copper ready to be smelted, as well as huge smelters. In one version, about 1340 AD, a Winnebago warrior, perhaps Redhorn or a descendant who was of mixed ancestry, as his brother was blonde. This is important because this is going to tie in with my Ireland the Great material, the Phoenician material, the invasion of the red men, or the men covered in red sunscreen, red ochre, the red ochre burials, which I've covered in all of my Mississippian and Missourian articles, that these giants were often found in red Cahokia or red ochre, which they used as sunscreen, this iron-rich material that these fair-skinned traders from the Gotland, Ireland region who were coming through the Gulf of Mexico and up into Aztalan, they were called the Red Men. And they had blonde hair. Not all of them. Red hair, blonde hair, lighter skin, darker skin. But the Phoenicians weren't just of one, quote, skin color. His brother was blonde, battled the tall Aztalan red-haired giants to death. Archaeological evidence from the site reveals a mass burial of 800 people, and several had been cannibalized, decapitated, and had their hands removed. Now, burials like this are found all the way into Florida. These traits are also found in Egyptian prisoner burials. Again, we're connecting the Egyptian mummies, the Egyptian beer making, all sorts of things. Aztalan's conical burials reveal a tall, headless warrior. Recent excavations indicate there is another older city underneath the current site. Again, recent excavations indicate there is another older city underneath the current site. So again, some kind of cataclysm, flood, buried this place in sediment 10, 20, 30 feet, 60 feet. Remember that one building they found 60 feet? And then perhaps an ice age came post this, and the second wave of mining continued. This would be the post AD mining. Following the battle, the red-haired giants went back across the sea. Redhorn, also called he who wears human heads for earrings, is depicted as wearing two inverted, shrunken skull earrings, suggesting decapitation and cannibalism. His image is also found on Spiro Mound, Oklahoma, and Muskota, Wisconsin artifacts. At Aztalan, two inverted skulls were found placed in the center slab of the site, linking it to the red horn cult. However, how old is the red horn myth? His image was painted on the cliffs of Baja, California cliffs by Chumshe priest, found etched in the hills of Wilmington, England, where it is dated to 2000 BC, and painted on the Gottschall Cave, Muskota, Wisconsin walls. Documented by its multiple global images, it appears that the red horn myth is much older than the Aztalan story. And again, I've covered the tall, red-headed cannibal slave traders that exists all the way into the Gulf of Mexico, into Mesoamerica, into Arizona, and also Nevada, right? The Lovelock Cave story about the red-headed giants who were living underground, who were killed by the Indians there after stealing their warriors and eating their men alive. Located 80 miles north of Aztalan, the Gaucho cave drawings depict Redhorn battling the two handless giants with the help of the Thunderbird spirit, closely resembling Spiro Mound imagery, suggesting trade between the two sites. The Gaucho cave dates back to 2000 BC, but the cave sketches date from 1000 to 1300 AD. Gaucho cave imagery was examined by laser lights and studied for its unique echoing characteristics. In addition to platform, pyramidal, and effigy mounds and many copper artifacts, Spiro Mound also contained copper-plated boats. Again, copper-plated boats buried within its effigy complex. The similar red horn figure and similar burial practices, i.e. decapitated and handless figures, carved shells, leak Aztalan, Cahokia, Muskota, and Spiro effigy sites together, all accessible by water or land. Recently, a theory has been developed describing the Aztalan residents as the red-haired giants, as the Gaunches or dog people from the Canary Islands off the African coast. The light-skinned, red-haired Gaunches traded copper, worshipped and ate dogs, and were great oceanic navigators. Now, this story is really interesting because you can find this with the dog cult of Mesoamerica in Anubis, and this also exists. Obviously, the links with Egypt. They also were navigators for the early Phoenician copper miners and traveled as far as Central America and the Upper Peninsula, where they intermixed. Author Frank Joseph believes that the Aztalan site was settled first by the Gaunches and then by their descendants from Tulum, Mexico, around 3000 BC. They navigated the Phoenician ships through the St. Lawrence Seaway to mine copper and hauled it into the refining ports, such as Aztalan. Later, 900 to 1340 AD, their ancestors returned to briefly mine copper until the final battle with the Winnebagos. This theory explains the two waves of copper trade. Again, I could go on and on if you want to read this book, The Ancient Sauk and Ojibwe Legends by J. Price, PhD. I'm going to skip ahead and just do another book. This is called Digging and Discovery Wisconsin Archaeology by Holiday, Diane Young. Just a little bit more on this red horn idea, and then we're going to end it here. Appreciate you all. 198. Holy smokes. Almost 200. That's fantastic. Amazing. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining me after almost 3 months off. What jobs aren't based online to the public? Okay. If you guys have any questions at all, please start typing them out now. I'm going to spend a tiny fraction of the end here just kind of reading your comments. Even if it's not a question, a comment, I'm going to read through them here. So type them out now. I'm going to read this short little section about Redhorn, and then we're going to end it here. Thanks for joining me tonight. Meeting Redhorn. In 1984, Dr. Salzer and crews of archaeologists and volunteers began spending summers at the Gotcho Rock Shelter, documenting the rock art and excavating through layers of dirt on the rock shelter floor. How did archaeologists find out about the site? Several years earlier, some kids were playing at the rock shelter. One of the kids who was using a flashlight shone it on a wall and amazingly discovered images that had been painted there long ago. Dr. Salzer and his crew were still making new discoveries as they continue working there. In 1992, they even found a 10-inch high sculpture of a human head. Dr. Salzer believes that the paintings show figures from the legend of Redhorn, a kind of superhero of the oldest stories of the Ho, Chunk, and Iowa nations, sometimes called Redhorn and sometimes known as he who wears human head as earrings. This superhero of long ago had many adventures. The sculpture of the head probably represents a specific character in the Redhorn legend. Redhorn, as the youngest of 10 brothers, first showed his supernatural powers when he won a foot race and revealed that he had red hair. Later, he became a leader of his nation and a hero to his people. He had several special friends who helped him protect his people from a group of giants trying to destroy them. These friends included Turtle and Thunderbird, a creature who is also known as Storms as he walks. One of the giants, a red-haired chieftainess, woman chief, also befriended Redhorn. They defeated the other giants in a series of challenges: a ball game, a shooting match, a dice game, and a breath-holding contest. Redhorn then married the red-haired chieftainess, but the trials against the evil giants were not quite over. In the final contest, the giants out-wrestled Redhorn and his friends and killed them. Redhorn's sons finally defeated the giants and brought the Redhorn, Storm as he walks, and Turtle back to life, and they continued their adventures. Because people enjoyed hearing about Redhorn, storytellers often kept the legends alive for hundreds of years. Along with the rock artists, they have given us another clue to understand part of Wisconsin's past. Looking at Redhorn, one of the many pictographs at the Gotcho Rock Shelter, one large group contains both human and animals, including Turtle and Thunderbird. The large human figures might be the giants in the Redhorn legend, and the one painted with red hair is likely to be Redhorn's wife. The smaller figure near the falcon-like Thunderbird might be Redhorn himself. Did you notice that the lower right corner where a small man holds a long pipe? His message may be that this pictograph carries special meaning because pipes are sacred to the North American Indian cultures. Again, if you want more digging and discovery, Wisconsin archaeology. All right. Let's go up here. I'm just going to read through the chat. Ben is the best. Thank you, Crypto Alchemist. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining me tonight. Wow. So there is a direct connection between Muskota, Wisconsin, and Baja Cali. Absolutely. I've been showing that through all these episodes. We're dealing with a very similar culture who are at war. It's like the biblical stories. They're very, the Canaanites and a lot of these stories have a lot of very strong historical relevance here. Copper-plated coats. We all have gold-plated satellites. What? Okay, I already covered that one. The Finane, the Fianna, the Irish hound warriors led by the giant Fionn, meaning white. Fantastic. Think this. I was covered some of that in my Ireland the Great stuff, and I'll get to more of that. I appreciate. Great comment. Was the copper and silver grab a way to stock up in the advance for the Silicon era? Perhaps. Perhaps, Nick. Absolutely. I'm sure a lot of it was stored underground. I talk about a huge underground city in my oh man, what's it? Ancient one of my videos. Gosh, I'm gonna have to pull it up here. Give me 1 second. It's really important. If you want to go deeper and see, perhaps there was this same civilization was storing some of this stuff underground. I have a really great video for that. Let me, just because I'm spacing the names, I have so many now. Subterranean Kingdom of Atlantis in the Rockies, War with Dragons, and Ancient Races of America. Check out that video. Amazing article. Shows you that a lot of these ancient advanced cultures were storing things underground and even living underground. Okay. As in fauna, Phoenician. Absolutely, Dankness. Made that connection. The Finn with Finland, and yeah, these are the Tartars, the people that were fighting against the usurped Rome, right? Yeah, 100%. Just happy to catch a live stream. Amazing stuff. Any chance that America is the true Babylon from old? Absolutely, I would say part of it, 100%. As I stated earlier, Aztalan, the Babylon of old, is kind of what they titled the article. The Babylon of America is what they called it, right? And you have these giants, cannibals, running mining operations, probably enslaving locals to work the mines. Besides the wearing heads or earrings, seemed like a cool yeah. Man, I wonder the same thing. I got plenty of interesting rocks and artifacts collected from Southeast Minnesota. Any way to send pics and get opinions? Yeah, my email is on my YouTube channel. You can DM me on Instagram or on Twitter. I'd love to see them. Thank you so much, Samuel. Thanks for being here. Susan, the $20 donation. Thank you so much. I sent you an email, research a project you might be interested in. Thank you so much. I may have stated this before, but I had my last email hacked. My most current and checked email is now posted on my YouTube channel in the contacts area. So if that's the one you're using, thank you so much. I'll double check. Brett, thank you so much for being here tonight. Is Redhorn Orion? Absolutely has a lot of mythological overtones here. Thunderbird, he who lightning strikes as he moves or whatever, storms as he walks. The overlays here with the Greek and the Roman mythologies is pretty evident. So we could absolutely be talking about a mythological story. Oops, that was supposed to say copper-plated boats. Yeah. Yep. And some of these copper-plated boats are found in my Colorado episode underground. Yep, lots of copper. Yay, catching up with the live stream. Okay, that's it. All right, guys. I think we 200 people at the highest. Amazing. Thank you so much. Glad to be back at it. Appreciate you guys so much. Can't wait to read the comments. Again, check the description for a link to the Twitter thread so you can read some more of that stuff. And be sure to follow along in the future and more to come. I'll have a video out by Monday, and expect more material to finish up my Mesoamerican series and my Ireland the Great material in the coming week. Appreciate you all so much. Thanks for spending your precious time with me, and enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Thank you again so much. Love y'all. Again, any comments, questions, anything, please make sure to leave them for me, okay? Thanks, guys. Have a great night.